Hello and welcome to Rage Report. Monday's story reads, Tory anti-extremism website warns argumentative teens might have been radicalised. So this story comes from NIcky Morgan, the Tory MP who refused to do her 11 times tables because she thought she'd get it wrong, even though she made such a big deal about kids having to know it. The article reads, the Tories have launched a new anti-extremism website to help parents spot warning signs that children might have been radicalised. But critics say the website mainly helps parents spot warning signs that children might be becoming teenagers. And that makes sense. Teenagers are rowdy, extremists are rowdy. Ooh, shit way of saying it. So the site's called Educate Against Hate, and it's supposed to warn parents to look out for argumentativeness or aggression and an unwillingness to listen/consider points of view which contradict their own. It does sound honestly a lot like they're trying to warn parents about becoming teenagers. These aren't the sole signs of being radicalised. It could easily just be becoming a teenager. But let's not allow that to show how out of touch the Tories are with the real world. So it also suggests changes in appearance, excessive time spent online or on a mobile phone, and a rejection of activities they used to enjoy. These are all supposed to be signs of impending radicalism. Fucking stupid. That might as well be the definition of the transition for these kids becoming teenagers. That's ridiculous. And look at her stupid face. She has no fucking clue what she's talking about. So by these standards, if your child wants to change its style, which we know teenagers constantly do, if your child also wants to spend more time on the internet or on their mobile phones, which we know teenagers do, and also a rejection of activities, like that could just be them growing out of the things they used to love. As a child, I'm sure lots of children enjoyed colouring in books. As a teenager, they're probably not going to enjoy colouring in books. Good work. Also Monday morning, Miss Morgan appeared to back a ban on full-face veils in schools. Miss Morgan said, uniform policy is very much up to schools, and head teachers have the right to decide if they want to ban the veil. I personally don't think they should have the right to ban the veil. On BBC Radio 4, Miss Morgan said, we are not going to tell people what they can and they can't wear. That's very important, remember that. That would cut across the values we are talking about that we want everybody to follow. Okay, fair. So you don't want to tell people what they can and can't wear. But there are times, there are institutions and organisations where it is right. So, Miss Morgan, you just said we don't want to tell people what they can and can't wear, but we're going to tell people what they can and can't wear. Very professional there, very professional. The article goes on to say, where the school leaders want to have a clear uniform policy, they want everybody to observe and they may decide that point that they don't want people to wear the full face veil. Tuesday's story reads, 300,000 benefit claimants only get Christmas bonuses after Christmas thanks to Tory welfare blunder. So, more than 300,000 sick and disabled benefit claimants were only given their Christmas bonuses after Christmas, thanks to hapless welfare chief. A technical error meant 327,379 people on employment and support allowance did not receive a token £10 state gift, usually paid in the first full week of December in time for the holiday season. The work done by the DWP is constantly in question. I don't recall the last time they did a good job. All they seem to do is cause disaster for some of the most vulnerable people. Labour's Owen Smith said, the incompetence doesn't bode well for the implementation of universal credit and all the other complicated cuts the Tories are overseeing. People have always known the Tories are cruel, but they used to think they were at least competent. Ian Duncan Smith seems to be having a good go at proving they're both cruel and incompetent. Perfect. Excellent way to describe Ian Duncan Smith. So, a 40-year-old from Liverpool has been quoted saying, I've got gas and electricity bills to pay and it's going to ruin Christmas. Not just for me, but for my kids. It's fucking horrible. The Dallas Free, who asked not to be named, eventually did receive his main ESA payment at 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And all this came just days after the Work and Pension Secretary, Mr. Duncan Smith, told people hit by benefits cuts to work an extra 200 hours a year. Overall, this story is pathetic. Not the writing of it, but the way the DWP has reacted. They've again just shown that this massive organisation does not care about people. Wednesday's story from The Independent. David Cameron accused of silently taking Britain into Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. There was some information on this in the first raid report, talking about the unscrutinised sales of weapons to Saudi Arabia, so we already know about it. David Cameron has been accused of silently dragging Britain into another conflict in the Middle East without parliamentary approval or oversight. First off, I'd like to say, David Cameron, you've definitely dragged us into conflicts in the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. If you're offering weapons, equipment, and advice, then we are involved. We have a responsibility now. Without parliamentary approval, that's no surprise. The Tories are known to disregard parliamentary approval. They appear to think they're above democracy. The call comes as new figures released by the government show the British bomb and missile exports to Saudi Arabia have increased by 11,000%, from 9 million to 1 billion over 3 months last year. Thousands of civilians have been killed in Yemen, including a large number by the Saudi Air Force, and they've done that using British-built planes with pilots who are trained by British instructors, dropping British-made bombs, who are coordinated by the Saudis in the presence of British military advisors, Mr. Robertson said during the PMQs. I'd say that's pretty solid evidence that we are involved in conflicts in the Middle East. He goes on to say, isn't it time for the Prime Minister to admit that Britain is effectively taking part in a war in Yemen that is costing thousands of civilians' lives, and he has not sought parliamentary approval to do this? So our Prime Minister really fucking loves killing civilians. Of course, the Prime Minister rejected the suggestion that the UK was taking part in the conflict, but admitted that British advisors had a role in Saudi Arabia. It sounds like you can't reject the suggestion, but then admit to help. So the Prime Minister said, just to be absolutely clear about our role, we're not a member of the Saudi-led coalition. British military personnel are not directly involved in the Saudi-led coalition's operations. Personnel are not involved in carrying out strikes, directing or conducting operations in Yemen, or selecting targets, and we're not involved in the Saudi targeted decision-making process. But yes, do we provide advice, help and training in order to make sure that the countries actually do obey the norms of humanitarian law? Yes, we do. You can't say we didn't do this and we didn't do that and then go on to say, but yes, we do provide, because then that would mean that you do play a role. Criticism of the Saudi military operations have, however, included the bombing of multiple hospitals run by the charity, you can read that off the screen, and the deaths of thousands of civilians, including 130 at a single wedding. I hope the Prime Minister can contain his erection at how many civilians are dying. Instead of brushing aside Mr. Roberts' questions, the Prime Minister should immediately suspend export licences for all further UK arms bound for Saudi Arabia and allow a full investigation into allegations of serious breaches of international humanitarian law. I completely agree, but that would mean that the government would lose out on money, and it would also mean that Cameron doesn't get to kill anymore. That was a silly suggestion. Of course we're going to continue selling unscrutinised weapons to Saudi Arabia so they can kill civilians. Thursday's story, and we see that the government tried to hide damning evidence. A&E departments may have been understaffed. The government blocked damning documents showing A&E departments could be understaffed half the time. However, a top aide to Jeremy Hunt said the internal advice was too confusing to publish without. So the guidance suggests 2 nurses to 1 patient suffering major trauma and 2 to 1 patient suffering cardiac arrest, 1 nurse for every cubicle in A&E, and 1 for 2 patients in the resuscitation area. So these guidelines were written by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, or NICE. It sets minimum ratios for nurses to patients and points out how hospitals should not draft in staff from other parts of the hospital to fill gaps due to their lack of expertise in aid. NICE seem to have been evaluating our NHS. They found that half the time, or around half the time, we don't have enough staff, and then instead of rectifying this problem, the Department of Health forced NICE to stop its work into safe staffing last summer. So basically, our government, instead of deciding to fix the NHS, just closed their eyes and ears and continue on with. Labour's Shadow Health Minister, Justin Matters, also seems to disagree with this, saying, safe staffing levels are essential for patient safety and were a key recommendation for the Francis. He goes on to say, the government's decision to block these guidelines from being published is deeply concerning and raises a lot of questions about the ability of experts to give independent advice to the NHS. This is also deeply concerning for many other reasons, such as, can the patients trust them if they're not willing to be transparent with us? I think we found out why the Tories didn't want this information out. Donna, of the Royal College of Nursing, RCN, added, these recommendations would have exposed shortages and this would have had financial consequences. And there it is, the Friday story. and Ian Duncan Smith has been told to abandon damaging cuts to the benefits for disabled people. Ian Duncan Smith has been urged to abandon plans to cut a benefit which charities warn will push disabled people further into poverty. There will be a vote in the House of Lords whether to cut employment and support allowance from £102 a week, which is where it currently stands at, to £30. I fail to see how that's going to help anybody. Surely that would just give them less opportunity to go to job interviews, because they'll have less money to spend on public transportation or whatever they need to get to a job interview. The heads of 30 charities have apparently written to the Work and Pension Secretary to warn him of the damaging effect this will have to disabled and vulnerable people. However, the Department of Work and Pensions has accused the charities of scaremongering. Yes, because when you're getting your allowance cut by more than half, it's definitely scaremongering. No, that's actually happening, and it is a scary prospect for some people. It's not scaremongering, it's just true. But the DWP go on to tell the Huffington Post that this kind of scaremongering does not help disabled people, and it fails to acknowledge that existing claimants and those with the most severe disabilities will not be affected at all. I hope that's true, but the DWP are a piece of shit organisation, so it wouldn't surprise me if they just put that in there to make themselves sound good. The spokesperson goes on to say, the current system needs reform because as it stands, it fails to provide the right incentives. You know, I didn't realise by taking money away from vulnerable people that could incentivise them to get better. You know, I suppose with all this money we've saved, we can look to training these doctors, because now that the DWP has incentivised them to get better, we're not going to need as many doctors anymore. Well, actually, this has just solved the NHS crisis. Ah, way to go, Ian Duncan Smith, you fucking pillock. So it fails to provide the right incentives and acts to trap people on welfare. We are committed to ensuring that people have the best support possible, and that is what these changes are about. Bullshit. So that's it for Friday's story, and that's the end of the week. I'll leave you with the open letter to Ian Duncan Smith on the screen now. All links to the articles are in the description below. Thanks for watching.